They say actions speak louder than words, and inside that packed federal courtroom, Sean Diddy Combs' body was speaking volumes. On the surface, Diddy wanted the world to see a man humbled by accusations, aged by the weight of scandal. But to those watching closely, the cracks in that carefully staged performance told a very different story. From the moment he entered the courtroom, the message seemed clear. Or so he thought. Dressed in muted gray khakis, an unassuming button-up, and glasses delicately perched on his face, he moved deliberately, every gesture rehearsed. He poured water slowly, sat gingerly, shuffled as if each step was agony. But when no one was watching, he moved briskly, picked up dropped items with the reflexes of a man half his age. To the trained eye, it wasn't frailty, it was theater, a calculated act of vulnerability. And while Diddy worked hard to control the narrative with his body language, the real bombshell was about to hit. Not from him, but from the witness stand. That's where his former head of security took the stage. This wasn't just any witness. This was a man who had kept detailed notes, a man who had seen the tapes. As the prosecution introduced the reports, the courtroom fell silent. 2 reports, one written immediately after an explosive altercation in 2016, and a second written hours later, amended, expanded, and damning. Diddy's lawyers fought to keep them out, claiming hearsay, procedural errors, anything to block them. But the contents painted an ugly portrait of a man out of control, screaming, throwing objects, allegedly threatening Cassie over a cell phone. The defense tried to frame it as a lover's quarrel, a heated argument between consenting adults fueled by jealousy and drugs. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. They countered with graphic details from the reports, calling it what it was, abuse, and they weren't alone. Lisa Bloom and Gloria Allred, 2 of America's most high-profile attorneys for victims of abuse, sat in the gallery. Their presence sent a message. This was no private dispute. This was a reckoning. Still, Diddy kept up the act, shuffling, sipping water like an old man, pretending none of it shook him. But it did. When his name was mentioned in the opening statements, he didn't sit back like an innocent man. He jumped, quick, nervous. The mask cracked, and everyone saw it. Meanwhile, his lawyers, led by the sharp Tenny Gargo, tried to spin the narrative back in Diddy's favor. They painted Cassie as a strong woman, free to leave any time. They argued the government was overreaching into a celebrity's messy breakup. But the contradictions piled up. Because while the defense clung to the image of a consensual relationship, the reports painted a much darker story. The security guard wasn't just sharing gossip. He had seen the surveillance tapes. He wasn't in the room, but he watched everything. And what he saw forced him to rewrite his initial report 3 hours later, noting aggression, violence, and fear. The defense argued bias, speculation, overreach, but the prosecution stayed laser-focused. This wasn't just hearsay, it was pattern, a pattern the jury would see unfold, witness by witness, and the most anticipated witness? Cassie herself. The prosecution announced she was expected to take the stand. Pregnant, heavily pregnant. A woman once silenced, now standing carrying life, while facing the man accused of nearly destroying hers. That moment would be more than testimony. It would be a statement, a rebirth, and the defense feared it. They kept insisting Cassie stayed willingly, pointing to vacations, red carpets, public displays of affection. But the visuals in that courtroom told a different story, because it wasn't just Diddy under the microscope. His family, too, was being scrutinized. Justin and Christian sat quietly, tense, stoic, eyes flicking around the courtroom, careful not to react. Quincy sat apart, emotionless, but silence often speaks loudest. Misa, Christian's mother, arrived with a walker. Some wondered if the image was intentional or coincidental, but the symbolism was striking. A frail woman beside a man trying to appear frail. The symmetry didn't go unnoticed, and the twins, dressed in black, hair slicked back, they sat motionless. Their message clear: we stand by our father. But outside the courtroom, the public was starting to ask tougher questions. What had they seen? What had they been told? Because now, the whispers weren't just whispers. They were becoming headlines. At first, many couldn't believe it. Could the face of C-Rock, the king of white parties, the motivational speaker of hustle and wealth, really be capable of this? But now, people were remembering other whispers, other women, other stories, and the government seemed ready to bring them all forward. Behind closed doors, more witnesses waited, more reports, more names. What Diddy once believed he could outmaneuver with charm and wealth was turning into a public unmasking. Every awkward sip of water, every look to the jury, every rehearsed shuffle, it all fed into a bigger narrative. Is this the real Diddy, or just the version he wants us to see? Because this isn't just about one fight over a phone. This is about power, control, image, and the truth that's been hidden behind private jets and platinum records. And when Cassie takes that stand, and she will, her testimony won't just challenge his story. It could dismantle his entire empire, not just because of what she might say, but because of what she represents. A woman the defense says stayed willingly, but the prosecution says otherwise. They argue she stayed because she was trapped, emotionally, financially, psychologically, and perhaps most dangerously, by fear. And when she steps forward with the weight of her unborn child and the truth of the past, there will be no more hiding behind expensive suits or courtroom theatrics. For Diddy, the stakes couldn't be higher. If the jury believes the reports, the witnesses, and Cassie herself, it won't just be his legacy that collapses, it could be his freedom. And outside that courtroom, the world is watching. Fans, former collaborators, other alleged victims. Because this trial isn't about just one night. It's about decades of whispers finally finding a microphone. Diddy's body language may try to tell one story, but the witnesses, they may tell the story that finally brings his empire crashing down. So, what do you think? Is Diddy's courtroom performance fooling anyone? Or are we witnessing the collapse of one of hip-hop's most powerful icons? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more exclusive courtroom breakdowns, celebrity scandals, and the untold truths behind the headlines, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because here, we don't just tell stories, we reveal them.